Hello and welcome everyone. In this video, we are going to have a look at the King's Gambit trap from the black side. So without wasting time, let's get started. Starts with d4 and d5. This is the King's Gambit, and there are various ways here, which is the Albin counter gambit or the Queen's Gambit decline variation. We can also go for some London setup. We will be having a look at all such variations and the most popular traps from the black side in this video. So let's first start with the Albin counter gambit. It starts with e5, and when the black player captures the pawn on the e5 square, we push it on the d4 square. This is all standard stuff. Here, there are usually two responses which white can do. White can either go with their pawn to e3 or they can play the knight to f3. Now, most common is, and the correct one is to play the knight to f3, but many of the players also go for the pawn to e3 move. Now, the reason behind moving the pawn to e3 is that they are annoyed by the pawn on d4, which is not allowing the development of the knight to c3. So they want to get rid of it. And then once they play their pawn to e3, now you can go with your bishop to b4 and give a check. Bishop has to block it. Definitely he'll go bishop d2. And then you can just capture the pawn on the e3 square. Now, if you are offering a free bishop on the b4 square to your opponent, and if he gets greedy and captures the free bishop there, then he's totally gone, because after bishop captures on the b4 square, you capture on f2 and give a check. The king cannot capture the pawn here because then the queen will be lost, so he'll have to move the king up. Let's say he goes with his king up, and now here you promote your pawn to a knight and not to a queen. So I'll tell you the reason why you should be promoting it to a pawn and not to a queen. If you promote this here as a queen, then he will first capture your queen, you capture it back, and then he's gonna get it. He captures your queen with a check. You don't want to miss out on the check, and that's when you should be capturing the knight here and promoting it to a knight only. That knight gives a check. Now, again, the king cannot escape, or he cannot go away from the king, otherwise, the queen will be lost. So, let's say he takes the knight, and then comes the stunning bishop g4 check, giving a check, and this queen will be won eventually. Now, let's quickly see what if he goes with his king back on the e1 square. If that happens, then you can play your queen to h4, give a check, the king goes to d2, and now you'll be a simple pawn up. You can continue the development by playing the knight to c6. You are a piece up in this position, and everything looks good here as white. Right? If he captures the knight over here, you are going to capture this bishop. You are going to be a piece of the one that you have captured on the g1 square. Alright. This was when he gets greedy and captures your free bishop on the b4 square. Now let's have a look what if he is not capturing the bishop, instead he's capturing your pawn on the e3 square. Even if that happens, then you can go with your queen to h4, give a check, and whatever piece blocks it, you can anytime go with your queen to e4. You are nothing but a pawn. You are also giving an attack to this rook. How can he defend the rook? He cannot play his knight or bishop, anything in between, it will be lost. Also, you're going to just grab this free pawn over here. So it is a complete win-win position for you as black. Alright, let's move to the next trap. It is in the Albin counter gambit, but now let's say what if he plays his, after d4, what if he plays his knight to f3? After the knight f3 move, now you can first defend. That knight on f3 was attacking your pawn on d4 square. You defend it with knight c6 there. If he plays his knight from b to d2, trying to give support to that knight, also instead of playing the pawn to e3, he's thinking that I cannot develop my knight on the c3 square. Let me just play it to the d2 square. If he does that, then you play queen e7. After pawn a3, the idea for queen e7 was to go in this diagonal, attack some pressure, put some pressure on that diagonal or that square. So he's defending it by playing his pawn to a3, but that doesn't help because now you're going to capture on the e5 square. If he captures your pawn back on the d4 square, then it's a checkmate in one move. Can you guys find it? Yes, it's the beautiful smaller checkmate. Just play your knight to d3 and that is a checkmate. Alright, let's have a look at the trap number 3, which is the most popular, the most common trap called as the elephant trap. Elephant trap, instead of you playing the pawn to e5, not going for the Albin counter gambit, but you go with the pawn to e6 here. After pawn e6, let's say he continues with the normal development, playing the knight to c3. Now you can play your knight to f6 in this position. If he plays your bishop to if he plays his bishop to g5, pinning your knight to the queen, then we don't really care about that. Will defend it by playing a knight bd7. If he captures here thinking he's winning a free pawn, then you can actually capture his knight. Because now when he captures your queen on the d8 square, then you first play a bishop to b4, give a check. No option but the queen has to block it. You capture the queen, you give a check. The king captures the bishop, you capture his bishop, and you are one complete piece up over here. You are having one extra knight. Have a look. He's having a bishop and a knight, and you're having a knight and a bishop plus one extra knight. So this is the elephant trap for you guys. Well, now let's have a look in the declined variation. Now, after e6, if after pawn to e6, he plays his knight to c3, we play knight f6, bishop g5. Now, instead of he capturing on the c takes on d5 square, he goes with his pawn to e3. Then what can we do? We play the normal developing moves. We play our pawn to 6, so pawn c6, the reverse London setup here. So this is the London setup that you are trying to do. He plays his knight to f3 and you go with your queen to a5. Now the idea behind queen a5 here is simple. In future, you just want to pin this knight. You're pinning this knight at this point. Also, you are looking in the geometry of this board, trying to give a discard attack to the bishop on the g5 square. If he plays his bishop to d3 in this position, which is a normal looking move, developing a piece, trying to castle on the next move, now you go with your knight to e4, putting some more pressure on the pinned c3 knight. That's not it actually. You are also trying to attack the bishop. See, you have opened up the rank for the queen to go and attack the bishop. If your opponent thinks that, okay, my knight is in danger and I am really worried about it, what he'll do is he'll play his queen to c2. And then he was focused only on the knight, and meanwhile he is losing the bishop. So you are a piece up over here. Okay, not necessary that people will always fall for this trap. So what best can they do? The best option here is to play bishop h4. But in that case, still you will be a pawn up, right? That's not it. This is the Cambridge Springs variation. There's one more variation that I really want to share over here, which is after knight e4, bishop takes on the e4 square. If you did not capture on the c4 square immediately, but you play knight e4, bishop captures it, you capture it back. Now here you have to be really careful. You cannot capture this knight thinking that you're going to win a free knight when he plays his knight to e5, because can you find the move here? If you don't capture on the e5 square with your queen, the right move here is queen to d8. It is going to be a checkmate. So do not play your knight to e4 in that position. Instead, first capture on the c4 square with d pawn and then go for that variation. Alright, let's quickly have a look at our last variation, the fifth trap, the Taraj Gambit. Here after d4, d5, c4, e6, knight c3, don't go for knight f6. You can play your pawn to c5. If he captures here, you capture it back. The knight is in danger. Let's say he captures the pawn on the d4 square since the knight is in danger. Now you can play a knight to c6 attacking the queen. The pawn cannot capture the knight at this point because then the queen is hanging. It will be a discord attack on the queen. So the queen goes back and then you can capture on the d5 square with your e pawn. Let's say the queen captures it back. Do not exchange the queen. Instead, you can go with a normal looking move like bishop to e6. If he captures your queen, you're more than happy to capture it back with the rook because now your rook is in the central, that too in the open file. Here, if he plays a normal looking move like anything, let's say knight to f3 or pawn to a3, then you have a beautiful trap. You can first go with the knight to d4, if trying to show him that you're going to fork him on the c2 square, and if he defends it by playing his rook to b1, then you are going to play on knight to c2. That will be a checkmate. And not if not a3, then again what can he do? He can play his knight to f3, but that too fails to knight to b4 move. You can go knight b4. Even if he tries to defend and create some escape square for the king, let's say he just plays his pawn to e3 or e4, in that case you win the rook. So winning a pawn is also advantageous in the game. So this is a complete rook. Well, this was all about the 5 traps in the King's Gambit variation. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel and share with your chess friends. I will be seeing you in your next video.